It's hard to own up to mistakes. A lot of the time it feels like we never made any to begin with. Sometimes we try to rationalize it. It's not my fault, blame XYZ. Other times, when we know we messed up, we'll try to sweep it under the rug, hoping nobody will notice. Maybe we try to fix it, not knowing that we can't. All of these, and a litany of other quote-unquote solutions, are unconstructive and more often than not will lead to more damage being done over time. The one and only truly effective way to mitigate any further harm is to straight up admit that you made a mistake. But for some people that's impossible, because it's hard to own up to mistakes. And that's the crux of mouthwashing. Mouthwashing is an indie game that I kept a close eye on ever since I heard about it back in late July of 2024. I didn't know much about it other than the fact it was a horror game that had a style to die for. All it took was one look at the character designs and I was fully invested. I love stuff like this. I bought it almost immediately back on release in late September, and ever since then it's been rattling in the back of my mind incessantly. Like, I'm genuinely obsessed with this game. Like, this is what my Discord profile looks like. Almost everything is mouthwashing related. I have a problem. Hopefully, after this video, you'll understand why I do. The game opens with a sunset scene, zooming out to reveal that it's just a screen, a backdrop for a grotesque, mutilated, dying man. The music in this menu is super captivating, being really somber, using sounds akin to broken machinery and failing computery bits, components that will make more sense in just a second. There are very few video game soundtracks that really strike me immediately, but I knew from the first song that Mouthwashing's soundtrack was going to be amazing. The song, combined with the visuals of the mutilated man, does a really good job of putting you in that sort of headspace where you just know this game's gonna make you feel some things. Starting the game, you get a quick summary of the setting. You're in a cargo ship in space called the Tulpar, owned by a company called the Pony Express. 5 people man the ship in a haul that's lasted nearly half a year. The little summary ends with a simple message: I hope this hurts. I literally rolled my eyes when I read this, thinking that this game was just full of itself, but by the end, I understood that it had every right to say it. The game fades in with the simple line, 0 days before the crash. The Tulpar is heading for a space rock, and you need to steer left to avoid it, but you're only given the option to steer right, heading directly for it. The ship's autopilot takes over to avoid it, before you disengage the autopilot, sealing the fate of you and your crew. The pilot, for one reason or another, wants to kill himself and take everyone on board with him. You walk through a series of winding hallways that keep getting more surreal as alarms and the sounds of a baby crying fill the ship. Whoever you are, you're not sane. You're mental warping the ship in impossible ways, doubling back on paths you took only for them to be different, the hallucinations stopping only once the ship makes contact with the asteroid. Everyone on board survived. The 4 crew members of the Tulpar sit around the table in the lounge discussing opening the cargo hold in search of supplies. Being 2 months out from the crash, rations are running low, with only a vending machine stocked with barely edible meals standing between them and starvation. We get to meet each member of the Tulpar here, each of their personalities shining through. Jimmy, the person you play as and originally the co-pilot of the Tulpar, being the confident leader, wanting the best for the crew and assuming the position of captain after the previous captain crashed the ship.
We don't need him if we find the scanner, get the code, and open the hold. For better or worse, I'm captain now. I'll figure it out.
SWANSEA, the primary engineer and mechanic of the Tulpar, being a gruff old man who's very standoffish.
We ain't touching the damn cargo. The hold is locked down for a reason. The only thing worse than dying slowly is not getting paid.
Anya, the meek nurse of the Tulpar, being quite rational, seeing the value in going into the cargo hold. And finally, Daisuke, last-minute addition, intern of the Tulpar, working under SWANSEA, being very innocent and naive, to the dismay of his superior.
Come on, a quick look won't hurt.
How exactly is this group therapy committee planning on getting in there?
Oh, right here, boss. You're looking at the meanest wing of the regional junior baseball team. Straight up nearly corked a kid once. I can take the utility axe and...
You were goddamn born fully corked.
The crew ultimately decides to open up the cargo. Moving about the ship, there is emergency foam everywhere. The crash really did a number on the ship, with almost every room being opened up to the vacuum of space. Without this foam, everyone would be dead, sucked into space. Going into medical, you find Anya standing next to the mutilated man from the main menu. This was Captain Curly, horribly mangled after the crash. Talking with Anya, Jimmy's very rude to her for no real reason.
He doesn't want to keep still anymore.
What about the painkillers?
It just hurts him so much. I can't stand the noise.
You did make it through nursing school, right? Pony Express sure does know how to cut corners if nothing else.
I know you'll figure it out, Jimmy. You're so capable. Oh, also? Well, I was hoping you could help me with Captain...
Curly.
Right, sorry. With Curly's medication?
People have to be worth their titles. Don't you think, Nurse Anya?
Yeah, forget I asked.
I'll take care of it.
Tensions are naturally going to be high with rations running so low, but Jimmy seems to strike at the heart of Anya's insecurities. In a mouthwashing Q&A, we got a little more insight into each of the characters, where it says that Anya has tried and failed to get into medical school 8 times. She's only doing this job on the Tulpar because she needs money so that she can keep trying to get into college for her dream job. Jimmy knows this and is using it to put her down. Going to give Curly the painkillers, Anya runs from the room, unable to listen to Curly choking down the pills. Curly fights Jimmy in taking the pills. Anya did say that it hurt him a bunch, and though you can't see it, you can definitely hear Curly thrashing around when Jimmy puts the pills in his mouth. Anya kneels on the floor, sick from the sounds.
We don't have a whole lot of painkillers left, but you still want to keep...
Why do you think he did it?
Does it matter? What answer would make you feel any better?
I have to believe that our worst moments don't make us monsters, Jim. I have to. Even in his case.
This is arguably one of the most important lines in the game. It'll show up a few more times throughout, each one hitting harder than the last. Something I want to bring up, just so it's in your mind, is Polly, the mascot of Pony Express.
Polly says, "Are you working hard? Or hard are you working?"
Jimmy has a very unique connection to Polly that I'm going to talk about a lot later. To open up the cargo, as previously discussed, you need the code scanner, previously to be used exclusively by Captain Curly, but given the dire straits the crew of the Tulpar found themselves in, it only makes sense that they use it to get into the cargo. On your way to the cockpit, you can pass the utility room guarded by SWANSEA. Apparently, it's all foamed up, and he refuses to let anybody else in, not even Daisuke, his intern. One wrong strike will open the room up to the vacuum of space, killing everyone. SWANSEA, being the oldest crew member, the most familiar with the Tulpar and the inner workings of the ship, is the only one he feels is capable to do the job. Retrieving the code scanner from the cockpit and using it to reveal the code, you can open up the cargo. The crew hopes for spare parts to fix up the ship, maybe some more food, water, and medicine to survive a bit longer, give them more of a chance for a rescue ship to come get them. Whatever's in there, there's a lot of it. The game shifts to 7 days before the ship went down. The game has non-linear storytelling, often jumping between before and after the crash. You're playing as Curly here, getting a psychological evaluation. Anya has one more evaluation to do. Jimmy. He never takes the evaluations seriously. We know that Jimmy hardly considers Anya a nurse through the one-on-one dialogue in medical, and that's likely why he never takes it seriously, because Anya's the one performing them. Curly offers to do Jimmy's evaluation, but before you get to do that, you have to help Daisuke out of some emergency foam in utility. In utility, you can see that there are 4 cryostasis pods in case of emergency. These pods have 20 years of backup power in the event of an emergency. Just get in one and you'll be frozen until help arrives. That's most definitely why SWANSEA's the only one allowed to remove the foam after the crash, as one careless strike would destroy the pod.
Well, I can see the issue. The kid was brought on just to make me suffer. Intern my ass.
I was just trying to fix the vent. How did that trigger the emergency foam?
Because you're talented in all the wrong ways.
Ouch. Ugh, strong stuff, huh?
Get it through your goddamn skull. That vent is strictly off limits. Fully fucking collapsed inside. You're gonna get impaled, electrocuted, and cooked?
After helping SWANSEA and Daisuke, you give SWANSEA the axe to clean up the foam. You follow Jimmy to the cockpit for a psych eval, except that on your way there, the ship morphs, having an extra hall and a stairway that leads to a straight drop into a blood ocean. Emergency warnings and the twisted metal of ladders pop up from the water before the screen goes white. Entering the cockpit, Jimmy does the psych eval before Curly starts to monologue.
Didn't think you'd ever take to being a freighter pilot as well as you have. What, with how you struggled back on Earth?
Sure. All I ever hear about is how great of a leader you are. Honestly, it's kind of annoying. So what is it? How come it always seems like you're standing on the edge of a bridge with your feet in cement?
Lately, I've just been thinking. Is this enough? Should I just stay here because I've been successful at it? A good long-haul freighter captain?
And that's bad?
That's what I'm saying, it's not, but it's terrifying. I think, am I figured out? Is this all I'll ever be? Or do I take the risk and try something new? Even if I'm bad at it?
I guess I get it. You reach the highest rung on this ladder. So now you're thinking you might be on the wrong ladder altogether. Still a long way down from the top, no matter how you look at it. While I'm still climbing and climbing.
Something like that. But hey, you know I believe in you. Here, on Earth, doesn't matter.
Jimmy seems pretty narcissistic in this dialogue, only thinking about himself and how much farther below Curly he is, even in the midst of his friend opening up to him about his troubles. This dialogue contextualizes the hallucination from earlier. Curly's reached as high as he could ever hope on the ladder of a freighter captain. When you jump down, landing in the river, it is quite a long fall, just like Jimmy said. The track playing in the hallucination is called Lofty Ambitions, and the sky is painted with a beautiful celestial scene. Curly wants bigger and better, all the ladders cropping up being the different paths he could take. The soundtrack is pretty scary, and coupled with the flashing emergency warnings, it shows how, while Curly wants to do something else, he finds it an absolutely terrifying prospect giving up his life as captain. Part of him also believes it to be impossible, as none of the ladders reach as high as his hopes and dreams. The interaction between Curly and Jimmy ends when a letter from corporate comes in. The next section, strangely enough, isn't centered around the day of the crash like every other one. It just shows illegible, garbled text. This isn't based in reality. It's a sort of middle ground. Not really happening, but integral to the story nonetheless. In this section, you can watch some shows on a TV, ultimately ending with a commercial for mouthwash.
This is...
Mouthwash?
Unfucking believable.
There's gotta be an ocean of the stuff in here. This room looks freaking endless.
This is what they'd have 5 people hauling for over a year? All of this? For mouthwash?
The hopes of the crew are dashed. Daisuke's hope for spare parts and Anya's hope for food, water, and medicine are dashed. SWANSEA, however, immediately notes the mouthwash's ethanol content.
14% ethanol.
I suppose we'll smell good at least.
That's right, kiddo. You can bet your ass on that.
What are you doing? Stop that.
Woo-wee! Oh, shut up. I'm just an old codger taking care of his dental hygiene. You hear that? That's the sound of 15 years of sobriety, popping like a cyst. A glorious, magnificent, red-hot cyst.
Its purpose as a disinfectant is completely forgotten among the low-ration crew, instead using it to get drunk, a temporary blindfold to their problems. Getting back with Curly, one day after the psych eval with Jimmy and 6 days before the ship goes down, you have to break the news. While the letter from corporate is usually unreadable, if you activate NoClip and get really close, you can read the message which says that this is going to be the Pony Express's last haul, and everyone is getting fired. Everyone except Curly, who's getting promoted. He can climb further up the ladder. He's supposed to wait until 48 hours before the haul is complete before telling the crew, but Curly can't hide something like this for that long. Before you get to, though, you get surprise birthdayed, which is super unfortunate as you have to break the news that Pony Express is going under and this is the Tulpar's last haul. SWANSEA doesn't seem surprised. Peeved, but not surprised. Anya, however, completely freaks out, not having any savings. The entire reason she joined the Tulpar crew was to pay for more medical school. Jimmy almost immediately jumps on Curly for this, as just the day before he was telling him how he wanted to stop being a freighter captain and do something else. Jimmy can go back to his struggle of a life back on Earth. Anya's now shit out of luck in regards to medical school, SWANSEA's running out of juice, and Daisuke, well, he'll be fine. He's young enough to be able to fall back on his parents. I want to note that, again, Jimmy takes the opportunity to belittle Anya. At every turn, he tries to twist a knife, but he never does this with SWANSEA or Daisuke. I think this rage at Curly is directed more so at Curly's promotion than being fired himself. We know he's pretty jealous of Curly's position, annoyed at how much better he is than him, so this just really rubs him the wrong way.
But you, headed for bigger and better, right?
I'm just working on my life being a place I don't have to fucking escape. That's what I was trying to tell you, nothing more.
We're the ones you're trying to escape. Leave the dirt behind now that your boots are clean.
That's not what I meant.
It is what you meant. You just couldn't frame it to yourself in a way that kept you as the hero. Abandon the crew, but remain the model captain.
Unbelievable.
What am I supposed to do?
Let's have some fucking cake, Props to the Twilight crew of the Tulpar. Props to our captain and his prospects.
Jimmy is envious of Curly, as is apparent through his discussion with him after his psych eval. Jimmy uses the knowledge of Curly, his best friend's desires to step away from his job, against him, making him seem like the bad guy, when in reality, Curly never wanted this for the crew. As Curly starts to cut the cake, the game moves forward again to 3 months after the crash, where Curly's pained cries wake Jimmy in the middle of the night. Walking around the ship, you can see that a lot of the boxes in Cargo's balcony have been opened, and even more have been opened further in the hold. Reaching the cockpit, you can find Anya and SWANSEA talking, SWANSEA still in possession of the axe given to him by Curly before the ship went down. Anya quickly looks away when she notices Jimmy as to not let him see her crying. Anya forgot to give Curly his meds, explaining his cries. Unlike earlier, where Jimmy begrudgingly gave him the painkillers after Anya asked him to, Jimmy insists. He wants to do this. Before giving him the painkillers, Jimmy talks at Curly, venting his frustrations at being thrust so suddenly into the captain position after Curly crashed the Tulpar, the position Curly so desperately wanted to be rid of.
Come on, stop with the noise. Damn it. I know what everyone is thinking. The way they look at me. What could I even say? And then, what would she do? Damn it! Here we are now. Me in the driver's seat. Thanks for that. Open up. I hope these make you feel fucking better.
Jimmy beats Curly after giving him the painkillers, leaving him quietly sobbing. While we can get a feel for what Jimmy's talking about, it'll become a lot clearer with further context. Something I immediately zoned in on was Jimmy singling out Anya. You've definitely noticed by now, Jimmy always attacks Anya for being inept in a medical position, trying to make her feel small at any given opportunity. She seems fidgety around him, and he knows this. That line when he speaks to Curly immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Jimmy's been shown to be a huge asshole throughout the game, but you get the feeling that there's something deeper going on. Something we're not privy to just yet. Another one of these middle ground sections, revealed now to be deep in Jimmy's mind, as this is a conversation between himself and Curly. The text is noticeably less garbled than before, but it's still entirely illegible. Sitting with Curly at the table, he elaborates a bit more on what he spoke about before the crash. While a lot of people may be at peace knowing they've figured out what they'll do for the rest of their life, to Curly, that sounds awful, not good enough. He feels trapped, wanting to run away from his life, but that was an impossibility. It may not have been the best life, but it was Curly's life. Sometimes really good things will happen. Sometimes there are mediocre days that you just kinda have to accept. Sometimes even those can be pretty good. Not everything will be good, but Curly would make do. It sounds like a pretty big contradiction from the man who would inevitably crash the Tulpar. Getting an axe to cut the cake, Curly is laid out on the table, and Jimmy swings at his once best friend. Four months after the crash, and even more of the mouthwash has been taken by the crew, mostly by SWANSEA, falling into his old ways after being a raging alcoholic before he sobered up 15 years ago. You can find Daisuke laying outside cargo after drinking his fair share. In the beginning of the game, Daisuke was extremely naive, not knowing the severity of the situation.
Man, my mom will straight up stuff me when I get back. I'll look like Swansea. We'll have a rad story to tell, though. I mean, they might even write articles about us. We could be on TV.
It'll impress the ladies, too.
Hell yeah.
Now though, lying drunk on the cold steel floor of the Tulpar, rescue nowhere in sight, tensions rising daily, he seems to understand how utterly dire the situation is. Ugh.
How many have you had? Those will kill you before
anything else. I know. My mom found this internship for me. Such a slacker, she said. I don't know. I just never knew what I wanted to be. Never was good at anything. Total screw up.
We're not done yet, Daisuke.
I just hope she doesn't blame herself. It's really sad. Daisuke is the youngest on the Tulpar, being a last-minute addition to the crew, explaining why there were only 4 cryopods while the ship was being manned by a crew of 5. The kid didn't even want the job, his parents forcing him to take it as they were worried for his future. Daisuke, while seeming comically incompetent, has always been shown to be trying his hardest, all in an effort to make his parents and his crew proud. Now, it looks like he's realizing that he'll likely die in this space freighter, barely held together by foam. In the lounge, you can find Anya eyeing a bottle of mouthwash, and again, she's shown to be incredibly jumpy and tense when in Jimmy's presence. She tells him that there's more painkillers in a storage locker buried by foam, and to get it, you need to get the axe from a drunken Swansea. Retrieving the axe and opening up the storage locker, Jimmy fully loses his temper with Anya.
Wow, Jim, you did it.
Yeah, it actually wasn't that hard once I figured it out.
Amazing, really.
Sure.
I hate to ask you again, but could you give Curly his painkillers? It still just makes me so nauseous.
You're not serious.
Look, I've entertained your sentimentality up until now, but I'm trying to actually fix things, Anya. I'm getting us through this. It's find the code scanner, then figure out the door code, get the axe, chop up the phone, but not too much, and best of all, give Curly his fucking medicine. But I'm bearing it. I have to. Because the captain has to take fucking responsibility on this goddamn ship!
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to...
Go make sure Daisuke doesn't choke on his own vomit.
No, I can...
I'll take care of it, Anya. I always do.
The message that shows up for just a second is incredibly abrupt, and you likely weren't able to read it, but it reads, take care of it and take responsibility. The pressures of captain life are starting to crush Jimmy, something Curly was trying to tell him he was feeling when he held the position. Jimmy repeats a sentiment Anya said at the beginning of the game, that our worst moments don't make us monsters, before promising that he'll get him and Curly out of this situation, under the delusion that Curly could ever resume his position as captain, or that he would even want to if he could. When Jimmy gives Curly his painkillers, Jimmy doesn't hit him, and Curly doesn't fight the pills as he did the first time, but it still causes immense pain. The next section doesn't center around the day of the crash, rather the hour of judgment. Jimmy locks himself in the cockpit, Swansea banging on the door, threatening to murder him, chopping him to bits. We don't know how it got from where we were to now, but clearly somewhere along the line, the tension, thicker than ever, snapped. Despite trying to reinforce the door with a rope and broken piece of pipe, Swansea breaks through the window, reaching for the lock. Two days before the ship crashed, Curly and Anya sit at the lounge, staring at the night screen. This encounter is arguably the most important in the entire game.
I actually kind of like the nighttime window screen. If you can believe it. So, I just come and look at it sometimes. If you look really, really close, you can see there's a dead pixel in the upper right corner.
That's so. Nope, don't see it.
In the back of my mind, it's always there.
Now I'll go bonkers looking for it. Cheers. I don't think it ruins the illusion, though. It's peaceful. Maybe I'm just used to looking at the bigger picture.
How many days of transport do we have left?
Let's see. Off the top of my head, around 237 days. Just under...
8 months. Hey. Why do you think Pony Express put a lock on the medical room door, but not in the sleeping quarters?
I suppose for the same reason they put a lock on the cockpit.
It's disconcerting to hear her ask that. Being the only woman on the ship, your mind might have immediately jumped to some dark places, as mine did. Nothing is certain, and we can only wait to see what comes out of that dialogue. 5 months after the crash, 1 month after Jimmy snapped at Anya, the end begins. Anya is stuck in medical, the door jammed. Investigating with Daisuke, Anya tells you that the door isn't broken.
Anya, is the door stuck?
No.
Huh? What do you mean?
Look, we're all stressed, but you can't go breaking down at every little hardship. Open the damn door.
You were right. You were right all along. I should have done this from the beginning. I always believed that our worst moments didn't define us. Didn't make us beyond repair. You think I wanted this either? Make no mistake. This isn't my worst moment. Far from it. It's the best decision I'll ever make.
Open the door.
I'll take care of it.
You're immediately reminded about the first interaction you had with Anya, where she told Jimmy this exact same thing in regards to Curly. Jimmy and Daisuke come to the conclusion that she might be doing something to Curly, but there's a haunting sense of finality in Anya's words. She's always been shown to be meek, always a step closer to meltdown than anybody else. To me, this read as a threat of suicide, maybe taking Curly with her. Regardless, Jimmy and Daisuke need to stop her. The only other way into medical is through the busted vent in utility, the one SWANSEA said was strictly off limits. Jimmy and Daisuke try to get SWANSEA to let them into utility, but he just drunkenly rambles, refusing entry.
Don't do anything! Stop, stop, stop! I can fix this.
Why do you keep fucking saying that? You hearing yourself? We still have disinfectant, right? The one from the extra medical stash? Get it, now!
The cocktail, you...
The cocktail? What are you blabbering about?
That was your fault. You would never have... I had no choice.
You... useless! You goddamn fucking idiot! There has to be something else!
Everything is crashing down. Anya locked herself in medical, and now Daisuke, from going into the vent to retrieve Anya, the vent that SWANSEA said would impale, electrocute, and cook him 1 week before the ship crashed, is bleeding to death on the floor. Searching the ship, you can use the code scanner on a grave to enter this weird staircase-filled MC Escher-esque room. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, you're taken to a dark room comprised of catwalks and boxes of mouthwash. A note warns you that you need to be quiet, or else a blind beast will get you, a beast you can't outrun. The note doesn't lie, as even walking will alert the beast, having to stand still when it nears to avoid it catching you. The it in question is a grotesque snake-like beast with a pony head, more specifically the head of Polly, the mascot of the Pony Express. Polly, again, is a character of minor fixation for Jimmy, and I'll talk more about them a bit later. At the end of the catwalk section, you grab a bottle of mouthwash from a Polly statue and use it as an impromptu disinfectant for Daisuke's wounds. The next section starts right where the one before ended, with Jimmy and Daisuke concocting a plan to knock SWANSEA out by mixing up a cocktail with mouthwash and isopropyl alcohol. Daisuke is incredibly against it, as he's always wanted to appease SWANSEA and prove himself to be more than just a dumb kid. Giving him the drink, he speaks to Daisuke.
You never should have come here. Who the fuck even decided to let you board, huh? Stick the idiot with a bunch of sad sack adults and see what he learns, huh? Bootstraps and all that. What a load of horseshit. You think it's all going somewhere, but every failure leaves you a little more mangled than before. Older, uglier, meaner, smarter in a worse way.
SWANSEA, despite the way he constantly talks down to the kid, really does care about Daisuke. He comes off as mean, but he's speaking from experience here. He knows the path Daisuke is headed down doing this internship, and SWANSEA is scared that another innocent, happy kid is going to turn into a mean old man like himself. SWANSEA drinks the cocktail, passes out, and drops the key to utility, in which we can see that there's hardly any foam at all, despite his earlier claims. There's only one cryostasis pod still functional, and Jimmy jumps to the conclusion that SWANSEA is just biding his time, waiting for everybody else to die so that he can use the pod himself. In the previous section, SWANSEA yelled at Jimmy to grab the disinfectant, meaning the isopropyl alcohol, but he didn't have it since it was used in this cocktail. I find it fascinating that Jimmy blames SWANSEA for the lack of disinfectant. Jimmy is a very self-centered man, thinking of himself when his best friend opens up to him, always trying to push everyone around him down to hold himself as the hero, the one to save everyone. This is something that SWANSEA calls out 8 hours before judgment, the fact that Jimmy is always saying he can fix things that he most certainly cannot. Ever since the first scene he was in, he's been trying to convince himself and the crew that he's the hero leader. He can fix it all and save everybody, a notion that, by this point, borders delusion.
Swansea said it's not safe. I know he forgot to tell us about the pod, but he knows everything about this kind of stuff. Maybe we should just wait for him to wake back up.
You said you could handle it. Swansea taught you well, right? Time to prove it. He'll be impressed when he wakes up. Proud. He'll understand why we had to do this. Then he can explain himself.
You think so?
Daisuke, everyone's counting on you. Captain's orders.
Yeah, I got this. Okay, here we go.
We know how this ends. He asks Anya what she did before the game cuts to the next section. The crash is coming soon. Curly heads to the cockpit in search of the gun, only to find Anya kneeling near the closet where it's stored. Curly thinks she's looking for the gun to end her life after learning she's being terminated, but that's not why she's here at all.
None of this has to be on our performance log. We'll figure it out together.
I'm pregnant.
You're... what? Who would you...
Captain, I told you.
Listen to me. We can fix this. I've known him for a long time. I'll talk to him.
Jimmy raped Anya. He's been cruel to her the entire game. Jimmy's been shown to be the model manipulator. He picks out what everybody needs to hear to get them to bend to his will, like how he knew Daisuke wanted to make the crew proud, especially Swansea, and used this to make him climb up into that death trap of event. He uses the knowledge of Anya's failures in medical school to hurt her. He always knew that Anya was a weak person, easy prey, never fighting back against him when he insults her, and so he knew it would be easy to assault her. I really like how you just instantly know who did it. Curly and Jimmy have been shown countless times to have had a long-standing friendship, and the fact that it cuts to the pilot and co-pilot seats, with Jimmy's seat being slightly turned to make it the focus of your attention, it's all extremely well implemented. There were a couple bits of foreshadowing around Anya's pregnancy, like how she got nauseous at the beginning, 2 months after the crash, with nausea during pregnancy usually being the strongest at around the 9-week mark, aka 2 months, or how she didn't drink the mouthwash at the table because you can't drink while pregnant. I want to go back to the scene where Anya was talking to Curly 2 days before the ship went down. When Curly gives Anya the estimated remaining days of transport, she immediately translates it to 8 months. She asked this to know if they would be able to finish out the haul and get back to Earth before she came to term. If the transport was going to take 8 months, she was obviously going to start showing well before they reached their destination, which is probably why she decided to tell Curly the next day. The line about Pony Express not putting a lock on the sleeping quarters was definitely about Jimmy's assault, breaking into her room in the middle of the night. Also probably why she hasn't been able to sleep, not feeling safe alone in her own room. Every scene in the game, she's always close to someone. Curly in medical and Swansea everywhere else. Most likely a safety thing. Jimmy wouldn't try anything if he'd be seen, and anytime she is alone, someone is in very close vicinity, like how she was eyeing the mouthwash at the table alone, frightened by Jimmy, but Swansea, drunk as he was just a few steps away. Curly responding to this question with that it's a safety thing likely felt like a knife twisting in Anya's stomach, as it was in her own room that she was the least safe in her whole life. Leaving the cockpit after Anya reveals her pregnancy to Curly, we cut back to 6 hours before Judgment, which, if you remember, is the hour that Swansea chased Jimmy to the cockpit.
The bleeding won't stop. Just try to stay still, Daisuke. I need a second to think. We can fix this.
Hey, kid. You hear me? Daisuke?
Hey, stop. Don't move.
It's all right, Daisuke. Calm down. This line of work. You could have never become like miserable old Swansea. What a tragedy. Decades of hauling ass for Pony Express. Big mighty bruiser with all his shiny tools. This is where it got me. The good life, huh? Thought you were dumber than a can of paint. Always just chewing my ear off about nothing. Useless ray of goddamn sunshine. Not an ace student, career workhorse, or force of ambition. Just a damn good kid trying his best. You could have taught an old fool like me a lot. Close your eyes, Daisuke.
Swansea may have been rude to Daisuke, but he cared about the kid more than anybody on the ship, wanting him to be safe, but due to Jimmy's delusions, he's suffering. But he won't have to suffer anymore.
You monster. I could have fixed him, Swansea. I have to do everything myself. Why can't any of you just give me some time to fucking think?
How do you still not understand? It's over. End of the fucking line. You won't suffer one more second because of your delusions.
Unbelievable. Stop pretending. I know all about your plan, Swansea. I went to utility. I saw what you've been hiding down there. Sneaking around with that axe, telling Anya who knows what. Now this? You're making sure you're the one who gets inside that cryopod.
Ha! I sure did talk to Anya. But it was her telling me all sorts of things instead, wasn't it?
When Swansea and Anya were alone in the cockpit, she told him about Jimmy's assault, likely why she was crying, and ever since then, he's been even further disconnected from Jimmy than he had been previously. He even alludes to knowing what Jimmy did when you try to take the axe from him to get more painkillers.
You done? I need that.
This old thing. This was entrusted to me by our previous, tragically inclined leader. Big responsibility. But you know all about that, huh?
Swansea ends the interaction with Jimmy, refuting the notion that he saved the cryopod for himself, telling him to use it himself. Jimmy could get in the pod right now, end this nightmare of his own creation right now. But he doesn't, instead opting to fetch the gun. Before I move away from Daisuke's death, I just want to note the subtle bit of foreshadowing for it. Swansea calls Daisuke a useless ray of goddamn sunshine before he sticks the axe in his face. When you went to go get more painkillers earlier on, Swansea didn't just give you the axe, instead opting to stick it in the sunset window screen. These two are the only instances where Swansea used the axe. I don't know, I just thought it was really clever and made it even sadder, somehow. Going into medical to get the gun, you can see what happened to Anya, overdosing on Curly's painkillers, choking on her own blood and vomit, her hand resting on her stomach where Jimmy's baby was growing inside her for the last 5 months. It's a harrowing sight. And it goes completely ignored by Jimmy, thinking so low of Anya that she doesn't even get a reaction from him. Jimmy picks up the gun and Curly just laughs at him, at how horrific the last 5 months have been. Swansea, seeing that Jimmy refused his offer to get into the cryopod and survive, choosing instead to grab the gun to kill him, runs at Jimmy with the axe. The day of the crash, Anya tells Curly that she told Jimmy about her pregnancy. Curly seems worried, and he rushes to the cockpit where Jimmy is standing, presumably weighing his options. Jimmy tries to hold his of Anya over Curly's head, reminding him that what goes on between crew members was Curly's responsibility.
Jim, I can fix this.
What do you think will happen when we get back?
We can figure all of this out. You and me.
All I ever hear is how great of a leader you are. God, it's so annoying. But now? What do you think will happen now when we get back?
We'll fix this together.
Everything you and I worked for in our lives, accomplishments, changes, none of it will matter.
You've gotten through difficult situations before. This time won't be any different. Work through it, one day at a time.
It's not just me, is it? You were supposed to be the one that had everything under control. You said so yourself. The ship, this crew, everything that happened here, this was your responsibility, Captain. That is what you'll be hearing the rest of your life. Or, this can all be remembered as a tragedy. Despite what must have been the best efforts of its acclaimed captain, The Tulpar crew was never found. No one survived to tell the tale. You're standing at the top, feet in cement. I get it now. Right?
Right.
I'll take care of it.
Jimmy walks into the cockpit, setting the ship to its crash course as shown in the very beginning of the game.
Jim, tell me you didn't. I should've. I didn't. What the fuck did you do?
Curly sprints in to try and stop it, but it's already too late. The entire game, you were thinking Curly was the one that crashed the ship, when really, Jimmy did it to kill everyone on board so that his rape of Anya was never discovered and he could never be reprimanded, so that he could never take responsibility. One of my favorite lines of dialogue is the first one in the whole game, because it holds so much meaning. After Jimmy crashes the ship at the beginning, and the game cuts to 2 months after the fact, Jimmy says anyone else would do the same thing. On a first playthrough, this is just Jimmy talking about cracking open the cargo in search of supplies, but replaying again with the knowledge that it was him who set the ship on its crash course, the fact that he says this right after the ship crashes, this is him saying that anybody who did what he did in his position would choose to crash the Tulpar to cover it up, risking the lives of everyone on board to save his own skin. I really hate how often I see people heralding Curly as someone who did no wrong. Curly, really, is a big part of why everything in this game happened. Curly had been friends with Jimmy for a long while, and gave him the job as co-pilot of the Tulpar to turn his life around. He had a sketchy past, run-ins with the law, but this was a golden opportunity for Jimmy to put his best foot forward. Curly fights to see the best in people, especially his best friend. I think the saddest part of Anya revealing that Jimmy assaulted her was the fact that she had raised concerns to Curly that something like this would happen. Concerns that Curly would ignore, because Jimmy was his friend. After learning about the assault, Curly doesn't rush to reprimand the rapist, instead trying to talk and smooth things over. If he had immediately punished Jimmy, he would never have been able to crash the ship, or if he had taken Anya's warnings to heart, Jimmy may have never even gotten the chance to assault her in the first place. Curly is by no means anywhere near as bad as Jimmy, but to say that he was an innocent character is so media illiterate, it hurts. Curly fights to see the best in people, and it's both his greatest strength and his biggest detriment. It's what let him be a strong captain and good friend, but it enables his friend to rape a coworker under his watch and ultimately destroy the lives of everyone on board. Going back to his conversation with Anya 2 days before the ship would go down, I want to go back to the dead pixel metaphor. When you first notice a dead pixel on your screen, you can pretty much never stop noticing it. The dead pixel is a metaphor for Jimmy, more specifically the assault which took place. For Anya, the dead pixel is always in the back of her mind. No matter what she's doing, where she is, who she's with, Jimmy and what he did to her is always playing over in her mind. She can never forget that. Curly, however, can't see the pixel, no matter how hard he tries, because he sees the bigger picture. Just like Curly practically ignored the concerns raised by Anya what Jimmy might do to her, Curly can't see the dead pixel. However, the fact that he says he won't be able to stop looking for it means that he believes Anya, somewhat, that the dead pixel is there, that it may have been possible for Jimmy to do something like this, as Jimmy did have trouble with the law back on Earth. He didn't flat out ignore the concern, he just didn't take any preventive measures. He goes on to say that the dead pixel doesn't ruin the illusion, that he's used to seeing the bigger picture. The dead pixel doesn't matter, as the window screen is still recognizable as the sky. Jimmy's assault doesn't matter, as the crew still works together. They're still a team. His friend is still redeemable in his mind. He can still turn his life around. But there is no redemption for Jimmy after what he did to Anya, after all that's happened. One hour before judgment, Jimmy takes Curly from his bed in medical, setting him on the table where he set up all of his dead crewmates to celebrate his birthday. They all call him Captain Jimmy, or variations thereof. He finally gets what he wants, Recognition as the great leader, the captain of the Tulpar, the man in charge, the hero to fix it all and save everyone, even if it's coming from the corpses of the people he's killed. Jimmy cuts a piece of Curly's leg off, the same way Curly cut the cake when he let the crew know that the Tulpar was done for, but this time, instead of cutting to another segment, we get a monologue from Jimmy after he puts a piece of Curly's leg on each person's plate.
A lot of people struggle to put food on their plates, but that wasn't enough, right, Captain? The lowest rung of your ladder is our highest, until it was all swept under your feet. Life isn't even worth living at the same level as us, but I forgive you. All of us do. I won't give up on you, even like this. I believe in you. We're going to make it through this. Sometimes we thrive, travel the endless reaches of space, but other times we just have to accept days like these. You taught me that, Curly. Let's eat. Let's survive.
Jimmy hated the fact that Curly was above him in rank, and he hated that he was seemingly ungrateful for his position. Curly had a good job that was able to pay the bills and provide, something that a lot of people, Jimmy assumably included before his addition to the Tulpar due to him taking issue with it, struggle a lot with. Jimmy saying that life isn't worth living at the same level as us is another note of jealousy for Curly's position, that he was on top for so long. Now that he's mangled and burnt, Jimmy thinks of Curly as finally on the same level as the rest of them, more importantly, the same level as himself. Jimmy, again, delusionally thinks that this situation can get fixed, that Curly can continue living his old life once he saves him, but now more than ever, that is completely impossible. His reuse of Curly's words from an earlier section in his mind about days where you thrive versus days you accept is fundamentally flawed. In the use by Curly, the most nothing day was just eating bad cake with a friend. Jimmy saying that this is a situation that just has to be accepted truly shows how deranged he is. He's sitting there with 3 corpses, eating the leg of his irreversibly mangled friend. He doesn't see how wrong it is, only that it's not the best thing that could be happening to him right now. Another section in Jimmy's mind. The text that was always garbled is now clear as crystal. With all of Jimmy's fellow crew members dead because of his influence, it's time, finally, to take responsibility. Walking into medical, it's an immediate look into what's occupying Jimmy's mind after all that's happened. The death of Daisuke, blood from his ventures in the vent, painting the floor, and medical curtains. Swansea's keys to utility hang over the open vent, the thing Daisuke was so against going into, but Jimmy coerced him into. Jumping into the vent, you can see a tool cart, on top of which there's a can of chicken noodle soup, something mentioned by Daisuke at the beginning of the game, and some green and pink game pieces. Something I really like about Mouthwashing is that every single part of this game has meaning, even the most nothing background set pieces. Something I never took note of until my friend Randy mentioned it, the game board in the lounge. It's the game of sorry, which is an apt game to be used metaphorically, as Jimmy, throughout the whole game, has barely felt any remorse at all for everything he's done. The game has 4 different types of pieces: blue, green, yellow, and pink, each representing one of the characters. Blue is Anya, green is Jimmy, yellow is Swansea, and pink is Daisuke. The game pieces are mostly stationary, staying in this position the majority of the time, and it's a good display of the characters. Swansea is mostly by himself, however he is close behind Daisuke as he's his intern, but we also know that he cares a lot for him, so he's keeping close to mentor him, yes, but also to make sure he doesn't get hurt, to keep him safe. What you're more likely to fixate on, though, is Anya's pieces all by their lonesome, with one being separated, having one of Jimmy's pieces situated right behind it. It's exactly like the dead pixel metaphor from earlier. No matter where Anya is, Jimmy's assault will always linger in her mind, somewhere. The game pieces move around when Anya locks herself in medical before committing suicide, with Jimmy's and Daisuke's pieces standing next to Anya's piece, all of which have fallen. Swansea stands near one of Jimmy's pieces, since he knows what he did to Anya and the mistrust is growing rapidly. When Daisuke is bleeding out on the floor, his and Anya's pieces are knocked over next to Jimmy's, as he's the reason they are dying and dead. Now that Jimmy has sentenced Daisuke to death, Swansea's even closer to Jimmy. Then, after he mercy kills Daisuke, he stands next to all of Jimmy's pieces. One of Jimmy's pieces stands between Swansea and Daisuke, right near one of the winning spokes. Going down one of these wins the game of sorry, but you can only go down your own color. It's like how Swansea gives Jimmy the opportunity to go into the cryopod and save himself, end the madness once and for all, but he just can't, going to grab the gun. And then, of course, on the tool cart in the vent in Jimmy's mind, his piece stands next to a fallen Daisuke. I don't know, I just think the whole game board thing is really, really cool. All the things in this vent show Daisuke's youth and naivete, as that's all he was in Jimmy's mind. The chicken noodle soup, from when he believed they were all going home, the game pieces, as games like that are usually for kids, and even the tool cart itself, since he was always really clumsy interning under Swansea. A bit further on in the vent, you can see Daisuke before he walks off, leaving behind a hibiscus flower. The hibiscus flowers are used to represent Daisuke's death and the guilt associated with it, as it's the flower all over his shirt, and the first time it showed up was on a grave when he was bleeding out. A variation of the hibiscus flower, the Hibiscus rosasinensis, has been shown to have anti-fertility and abortifacient qualities through a study done on mice, so it could be a representation of very, 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 very deep-seated regret for what he did to Anya, but I super mega highly doubt this is the case. It's most certainly just regret about what happened to Daisuke. Reaching the end of the vent, there's a note that says no turning back. It's been plain to see for a long time now, but there isn't any fixing what's been done, despite Jimmy's constant claims that he can. The fact that this note is in Jimmy's mind means that Jimmy must know this to be true, but he still can't admit it to himself. This is applied literally in this sequence, as if you turn around, your vision will fill with this weird red image before ultimately resetting you back to the note. This weird red image is actually Daisuke's face after Swansea axed him. It seems like Daisuke's death is the biggest thing on his mind right now. While he's been shown throughout the game to be mostly remorseless when it comes to Anya or Curly, when Daisuke was dying, he did seem really distraught. It's probably the fact that Daisuke is so young, and he had no real gripes with the kid, but it's honestly anybody's guess. Facing the light and moving backwards through the vent is how you complete this section, much like how Jimmy delusionally thinks that if he runs away from the fact that he can't fix everything, he'll just magically be able to save everybody. It continues like that until you reach the vent from medical, covered in caution tape and the word responsibility. And just like he's done the entire game, Jimmy stares responsibility in the face and runs away from it. Continuing forth, you fall down a massive area where you can see Daisuke's graves and his coffin marked by more hibiscus flowers, before you fall into medical, flipped on its side. A bunch of axes mark the vent, and going in it, you can see what Daisuke had to endure when you made him climb up into the vent. It doesn't even look that destroyed, except for one part that's way more collapsed than the rest, again marked by a hibiscus flower. This is likely where Daisuke would sustain the injuries that led to his death, as this flower is always used to symbolize his death. If this is true, it makes his death even sadder, as the vent is mostly safe everywhere else and Daisuke just made one wrong turn and it killed him. The vent ends just like it does in the ship, spitting you out in utility, where Swansea's been tied to a chair. You pick up the gun, shooting Swansea in the head. This crypt is full of references to Daisuke, with his picture in the chapel again surrounded by hibiscus flowers. Swansea runs around the crypt, chasing you with the axe. This entire section is exactly how it went down in the Tulpar, with Daisuke dying in the vent, Jimmy grabbing the gun, and Swansea chasing Jimmy down with the axe. Shooting Swansea 3 times, we get a monologue from him strapped down to the chair.
I have something to say. So shut the fuck up and listen. I spent 13 years half cut up to my eyeballs. Drunk, to put it mildly. Then, suddenly, I saw it. A streetlight shining in my face. 500 gigawatts of the power of God. A vision of my bloated body found in some ditch. Scared me straight. So I got a collar shirt, mortgage, and a credit card. All the things that make a good man. I hoped I could raise my children to be better than their old man. I wanted to believe I was never one setback away from my worst self. But the truth is, discipline, drive, routine, the endless fucking desperation to get shit done. A loving wife, great kids, sobriety. I'm telling you, accomplishments I'd been chasing all my life, never felt as good as I expected when I crossed the finish line. So now that we're at the end, taking inventory, those nights spinning out of my head, sinking into the sofa, broken glass in my palms, bleeding dry, the funniest thing ever. Old dogs laughing and snarling on a waterbed floor, mocking the moon for daring to show its face. All nausea and wreckage and vomit and ugly cruelty. The only problem in the world, an empty bottle. Those were the best days of my life. Yeah, those were the best days of my life. I got nothing to hide, ready to face the music. I can see myself for what I am. But you? Cowardly, selfish motherfucker, and you can't even see it. I should have been able to protect the kid. If I could have done one thing right, I wish it had been to give him one small chance off this goddamn rock.
Swansea, I'm going to fix everything. We're going to make it.
Fuck you.
Six hours before judgment, Jimmy locked himself in the cockpit to protect himself from Swansea. But in the other section that was 6 hours before judgment, where Jimmy got the gun, Jimmy is stuck in medical when Swansea decides to run at him with the axe. Jimmy, as you definitely know by now, will do anything to make himself seem like the hero. This is probably just a classic case of unreliable narration, and this is just Jimmy not being able to decide which outcome makes him look better. A big part of me doesn't believe this, as it's not how the game has been at all before this. Another theory, thought up by my girlfriend, Jimmy seems to know what the vent leading between utility and medical is like, and maybe Jimmy, being stuck in medical with a crazed Swansea just outside, made the split-second decision to crawl through the vent to get away from him, avoiding the wrong turn that killed Daisuke, landing in utility. By the time Swansea realized Jimmy was gone, Jimmy would have already had time to lock himself in the cocktail. I don't know if I fully believe either of these, but it would explain how he got from medical to the cockpit without running into Swansea. Looking at Swansea's dead body, Jimmy shot him twice. We know from the scene where Jimmy holds his birthday party with the corpses of the crew that he's so delusional he can talk to the dead bodies. So I believe that Jimmy first shot and killed Swansea when he tried to break into the cockpit, only to have Swansea's corpse monologue to him before shooting him again. If this is the case, then Jimmy deep down knows exactly how depraved he is as a person. He knows the extent of the horrors he's done, how completely and utterly irredeemable he is, and how unfixable the situation is. But he still chooses to ignore this and continue believing himself to be the hero who will save these poor souls and get them back home, all of which have been killed or brutally maimed as a direct result of Jimmy's actions. Regardless, it explains what he was planning on doing with the free cryostasis pod. Jimmy thought that Swansea was waiting for everyone to die so that he could use the pod to save himself. However, through him saying he just wanted to give Daisuke a small chance to get off the Tulpar, and the fact that after Swansea mercy killed him, he gave the pod up to Jimmy, he was most certainly planning on giving it to the kid. It's likely what he was talking about to Anya in the cockpit, along with her telling him about Jimmy's abuse. Walking out of the room with Swansea's corpse, you can see Curly's face in the floor of the twisted, winding halls of the Tulpar, warped in the rapidly deteriorating mind of Jimmy. It goes to show how closely intertwined Curly is with the Tulpar in Jimmy's eyes. Curly was Jimmy's best friend on Earth, however, Jimmy was such a jealous person, so insecure of his own position in the world that he could only see him as a title. Captain of the Tulpar, manifested in how he's literally built into the floor of the vessel. Continuing to walk through the hall, it loops in an impossible circle, hundreds of eyes covering the walls. Whenever Jimmy was in the same room as Curly, Curly's eye would constantly follow him, as he's the only one who knew what Jimmy did in assaulting Anya and crashing the Tulpar, and this gaze seems to have affected him more than he'd like to admit. The hallway turns to flesh, and leaving the cavern, you realize it's Curly's mouth, and you can find Curly hooked up to some sort of machine. You feed him the piece of his leg that you cut off, believing that he'll thank you for it, and afterwards you can look at the TV, where you can watch Jimmy walk through the vast expanse of space, where he talks to a burning Curly. Curly realizes that it's his fault that the ship crashed. He could have reprimanded Jimmy for assaulting Anya instead of trying to mediate and smooth things over, and the Tulpar would still be in working order, fulfilling the shipment. Jimmy, hearing Curly say that he knows he'd be perceived as the villain, says that they can both be heroes, and that what happened was an accident. He says we were trapped as a reason why he had to crash the ship. He apologizes to Curly, but he's not really sorry, trying to skirt full responsibility for what happened. He's saying, I raped Anya, and you let it happen. If anyone finds out, I'll go to jail, and you'll lose your job. I'm crashing the Tulpar for us. Most certainly, he only did it to save his own skin, but by saying he did it for the well-being of his friend, he can still frame it so that he seems like he's ultimately a better person than he is. He's still trying to be the hero. He somehow, after everything, still believes that he's mostly in the right, that everything was just an accident, and that he's still a hero, and it's up to him to fix Curly's legacy. Jimmy breaks down, apologizing to Curly. He's starting to understand that he's messed up, but he's still not understanding the full extent. It's not Curly he's supposed to be apologizing to. It's Anya. Unlike Daisuke, Swansea, and Curly, who got their own sections where you could physically see and interact with them, Anya's section is completely different. She doesn't show up at all, only having a giant womb to perform an ultrasound on. It shows, again, how little she registers in Jimmy's mind, not being able to see her as anything more than her pregnancy. He's not sorry for the assault. He's not sorry for the pregnancy. He's sorry that he has to deal with the fallout. Performing the ultrasound on Anya's womb, you see two ponies, obviously again correlated to Polly, who at this point has an established link to Jimmy somehow. Finishing the ultrasound, a tangled mass of Pollys explode from the womb. Walking through the vent again, you can see the centipede of Pollys, which will run too fast to outrun through the corridors, but can be easily dodged by ducking into an offshoot. I'm definitely going to talk about this more in just a second. The section ends, and you walk through a hallway filled with mouthwash and Pony Express ID cards before walking up some stairs to have a one-on-one conversation with Polly.
Pony Express is dead, and so are you. Shut up. Curly tried his best. I did too, but he's the better man. I see that now. We can both still make it. I'll take care of him. I'm taking responsibility. Curly. Captain. I'm so sorry. Yes. Yes, I do. I fucked up, but I can still make this right. Our worst moments don't make us.
Polly asking why Jimmy's so concerned with Curly makes a lot of sense, as Curly should not be the primary focus of Jimmy's apologies or attempts at mending things. It makes even more sense when you consider that Polly is a representation of responsibility, specifically the responsibility for what Jimmy did to Anya. In the opening sequence, after Jimmy locks the Tulpar to its collision course, while the baby is crying in the background, he keeps seeing Polly, only to turn back and run from him until he ultimately winds up cornered. The whole reason he crashed the Tulpar was to run away from the consequences of what he did to Anya, running away from the responsibility. In the section where you had to walk quietly on the catwalks, that was how he tried to keep anyone from knowing about it, keeping it quiet. It also shows how he couldn't outrun this, as the creature is faster than Jimmy. Once he's caught out, that's the end. The fact that you can be caught once, with the blind beast staring at you before retreating, unless you make another sound, in which case it will kill you, shows how lenient Curly was with the knowledge that Jimmy picked Anya. He knows about it, but would never do anything about it. The centipede of Polly's is the same way. You can't outrun it, so you have to hide from it whenever it gets you in its sights. The last one is a lot more cut and dry, Polly literally telling Jimmy that he has his priorities mixed up and that he can say he's sorry all he wants, but there's no way it can right his wrongs. I really love the touch of the final Polly encounter having the nighttime window screen just to further connect this to Anya. It's really well implemented. The hour of judgment is upon Jimmy, and he scoops Curly up into his arms, carrying him all the way to utility, placing him in the last working pod.
It's okay, Curly. You're gonna be okay. You always had my back. I ended up hurting you even though I was trying to save us. But now you'll survive. It's like you said. Together we can fix anything. I'm just proud I got to be your friend and co-pilot, Captain. No one can hurt you now. We fixed it. I fixed it.
Polly's words were in one ear, out the other. Jimmy still heralds himself the hero of the story as he walks off, never once thinking about Anya, about the most heinous thing he'd ever done. And now he never will. I was left completely stunned after this ending. This game defied all my expectations. What I was expecting to be a generic cosmic horror turned into one of the most gripping character-based stories I've ever experienced. This game is about rape. Full stop. There's no beating around the bush. This story is about rape and its horrific consequences. But it's such a subversion of expectations as it's kept mostly in the background. Some games dealing with such subject matter would make the horror about the act itself, living through it and dealing with the horrifying mental effects it would have. Mouthwashing flips that on its head, making you the perpetrator, the horror coming from just realizing how unaffected you are by it. Jimmy walks around the cabin, calling himself the new captain as if he didn't alter the course of a young woman's life permanently. He proudly says he'll handle everything, save everyone, knowing that all he's done on the Tulpar is destroy. When you realize that Jimmy raped Anya, it's just immediately dropped for the most part, until he crashes the ship. Jimmy never talks about it, it's never brought up by anyone else, minus being vaguely hinted at by SWANSEA after she told him about it. It's mostly just swept under the rug. Something I didn't even realize until my second playthrough is just how much Anya's death was brushed off. Unlike Daisuke or SWANSEA, there was no big showing, no ending monologue where everything's laid out on the table, just one small chunk of dialogue that gets completely misinterpreted by Daisuke and Jimmy. She's killed off extremely unceremoniously, and it's devastating. One of the most horrific parts of Anya's ordeal is how it was handled by Captain Curly, the only person that could do something to her assaulter, the only person she could trust. He completely underestimated her complaints, and once the assault and pregnancy came to light, he still refused to act on it, just saying that they'll work it through, not understanding how devastating it is for Anya. He ignorantly thinks that it can be talked through easily, that it can be fixed, but there's no fixing something like that. Anya just had to keep working with her rapist as if he didn't do it. I can't even begin to imagine how helpless that must have felt, how isolating. One of the lines that she would say was, "Our worst moments don't make us monsters." At the time, she was saying it about Curly, as she was under the assumption that he crashed the ship. Looking at it now, and especially after she said it before taking her own life, it most certainly had to do with the rape. On the corkboard in her office, she has some positive affirmations for anxiety pinned up, with one of them being, "This does not define you." It's not uncommon for victims of sexual assault to blame themselves, and that seems to be the case with Anya, especially with the dead pixel metaphor. That scene is always playing in her mind. and she feels responsible. The worst part of this whole thing is that Jimmy has a fundamental misunderstanding about what he needs to take responsibility for. His inferiority complex forces him to zone in on Curly's title, and his feelings of general inadequacy make him yearn for the entire game to crown himself the savior of the Tulpar crew to prove something to himself, leaving no room to even think about Anya. And the worstest part is after he completely ignores the root problem, he thinks of himself more than ever as the hero, genuinely believing he saved the day instead of just saying he's going to. He didn't even save someone worth saving. He put the skinless, dying man who writhes around in pain all the time in a 20-year stasis. Best case scenario, nobody finds him. The cryopod runs out of energy and he can slowly die there, starving or dehydrating, whichever comes first. Worst case, he gets found and has to live however long he has left in absolute pain, constant misery. It's actually insane how well written the characters are in this game. Like, I genuinely can't even look at Jimmy anymore without feeling icky. They portrayed him actually perfectly. He's a wildly insecure man who faces his problems, if at all, like a toddler. This game deals with Anya's situation really well, as this game isn't just about rape, it's about rape culture as a whole. Nobody who knows about Anya's assault really cares. Curly just let it slide. At most, he would give Jimmy a finger wag and tell him off. He doesn't care, because he's the most powerful person on the ship. With Jimmy, his best friend, being right behind him, he can just sweep it under the rug, making sure nobody knows about it, but also that nothing is done about it. It may just be from a place of ignorance, not knowing what it does to a woman, but that is still wildly inexcusable. It was a heinous crime committed under his watch on his vessel. SWANSEA too plays into this culture. Anya tells him in the cockpit, and he never does anything. He doesn't tell Daisuke or confront Jimmy, he just sits idly on the sidelines. Like with Curly, a lot of people hold SWANSEA to a perfect standard. He's gruff, but he's an amazing guy. To say this is to ignore that he let a rapist maintain a position of power. He, again, at most, just tells him off for it. Nothing actually gets done. Ironically, a lot of the fan base plays into this culture. There are so many drawings on Twitter of Anya in uber-sexualized manners, people saying that Jimmy's hot, that Curly's a good guy. There are mouthwashing, like, alternate universe fan endings that have Anya give birth to the baby and have Curly and or Jimmy himself raise the child with her. A majority of the fan base admonishes these weirdo losers, but the fact that there are so many of them to begin with just shows how perpetual this culture is. Even the people who claim to love this game and understand it do the exact thing it aims to scare you about. At the start of the video, I talked about how obsessed I was with this game, how I couldn't get enough of it. But with how genuinely disgusting the fanbase seemed to be getting, it genuinely pushed me away from the game and the circles in which it was spoken about, which is really unfortunate, as this literally was the best game I had ever played. There are way more good people who really do understand the game and what it aims to explore, but those few rapist sympathizers are really icky to be associated with. I don't know. I hope if you watch this video, you can be normal about it. But anyway, that's about all I got. This is one of my favorite games, and it's honestly not even close. I've never seen characters so well written. I actually am still gobsmacked by it. I love all the characters. The ship is awesome to traverse. Small enough to never get lost, but big enough to reasonably assume it's suited for 4 or 5 people. The characters are all really well designed, just... oh my god, I love it so much. And hopefully now you can see why. I know it's been a while since I've made a video, but I mean, hey. It just goes to show how much I love this game. Pull me from retirement. Retirement. Wow, I can't believe I just said that. That's stupid. Pulled me from a hiatus of sorts. Whatever. Fuck this outro. A big thank you to the members who stuck around even in a dry spell of my content. Those being Neosynthesis, The Casual Cultist, my band Pig Vomit Has 3 Sails, Le Capitaine, Mirat Serdar Ozo, Nitsu, Alexander Brobeck, and MK Ultra Survivor. The latter 4 of which have been members for over a year now, so super mega thank you to those guys. Thank you so much for watching. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, subscribe if you want to, don't if you don't. I'm Abbsynthe, and I'll see you when I see you.